Welcome back to Plague Scythe Studios, everyone. Ryan here, rounding out our month-long review madness, checking out a very cool product. My first vintage guitar acquisition, the Electra 2247 Tree of Life. I've been wanting to make a video about this guitar for weeks now. I took everything in my power not to use this for a couple of the demonstrations and some of the more recent reviews, but I've been wanting to save it until I got a couple of things done on this guitar. So I'm very excited to talk about it. The whole origin of this is a few weeks ago. I was walking to my local music store. I had some in-store credit to burn, and I'm just going to grab some strings and to have a look at the pedals and that kind of thing. But as always, you know, gotta stop by, look at the guitars first, and near the higher end Gibsons and PRS selection was hanging this. And at first glance, you know, I thought, well, that's a cool custom SG. Now look closer and it's Electra. And I'd never seen this guitar before. This was the first time I'd ever heard of the 2247 Tree of Life in the SG body style, but there's actually a Les Paul version of this as well. Of course, it's not called that. This was back during the whole lawsuit era, especially in Japan with like Ibanez and those kind of brands that basically just took all of Fender's and Gibson's models and made something equivalent. But it was the first time I've seen the Gibson SG shape. Of course, being a Tony Iommi fan and just a SG fanboy in general, it was like, oh boy, I wish I didn't see that because it's gorgeous. It was a little bit different shape when I first saw it. So someone had thrown these atrocious clear aftermarket speed knobs on them. I replaced them with black. It also had the stock bridge pickup, which looked like this. Not bad, not wonderful, but I didn't really care for the aesthetic, so that's why it really ended up being replaced. But I also put a Gibson, legitimately Gibson 61 bridge in it, PAF of course, to match my other SG to get a little bit more closer on the tone. The change tonality wasn't huge. It definitely feels different to play, which is as much of anything as important, you know, for me. But and the bridge spacing between the bridge itself and the pickup poles is a little bit longer than my other SG, which does contribute to a little bit of a different sound. But so that's the shape I saw it at first. A couple other weird things. There's random holes drilled out everywhere, like here, as if there used to be a Bigsby or something on it. It's the only thing I could think. But even then it doesn't really line up. But you know, a little bit of wood stain and you can't even see it. It lines right up with the rest of the etchings. But yeah, so I walked around a little bit more. I was like, okay, I gotta try this guitar before I leave. So took it off the shelf and or took it off its display. I plugged it into a Marshall DSL with a Boss overdrive through a 4x12 cab, and man, it just sounded great. It feels super unique because it has a very flat neck, very Ibanez shaped, almost super strat neck, which coming from the super fat like 59 neck on the SG that I have, definitely a big transition. But I can't say I prefer one versus the other, but it's definitely a cool feel. And then you have a maple fretboard, so it almost feels like playing a Telecaster or a maple Stratocaster on the neck. And then coupled with one of my favorite body shapes, it's, you know, balances very well. It does feel heavier at first than I think it actually is, just because of that balance, but still works out really well. So after jamming on it for a solid 30 to 40 minutes, I started doing some legitimate research on it, because at that point I was pretty much sold on the way it played, and I just wanted to look and see what they were worth, and if I should have expected for this to even last as long as it was, and to confirm the year of production. And indeed, this is a 1978 model, and it's amazing to me that it's in as good of shape as it is. It must have been very carefully stored. Got, you know, a couple little nicks and dings on the back, but for the most part, the mahogany body is just in beautiful shape. Wood grain and everything still looks amazing. Obviously, you got this is hand carved, by the way, a hand carved, you know, oak vine. And then the inlays and the fretboard just look phenomenal. I mean, if you didn't know any better, you would think this is a multi-$1,000 guitar, you know, custom shop Gibson. You know, the only thing that kind of gave it away for me was the hardware, that it wasn't. So look it up, and this had a price tag that was less than half of what most of them were going online for. Not necessarily saying they're selling at that, but that's where they're getting posted at and what they're appraised for. So I walked out with it, and you know, had them set it up, and no regrets. It holds my C sharp and C standard tunings. It's a Black Sabbath machine. It plays all my other C standard SG stuff just fine, and yeah, I love this guitar. I don't think I could stomach gigging with it. Something happened to this, I would be beside myself, but it's just great to jam on, and another really awesome part of the collection. I wanted at some point to get another SG just to have a little bit different tones to play with, even if it was, you know, more or less apples to apples to my other one. And I think this one fits the bill. The only kind of downside to this is, for me, the tuning stability isn't up to par for what I want it to be. I do plan on a nut upgrade, you know, just kind of run-of-the-mill plastic as of right now. Obviously, they weren't going to spend a whole lot on that back then, so a bone nut would probably do it really well. The tuning pegs aren't amazing, but I don't think that's too big of a deal. And unfortunately, with the pegs here back on the tailpiece, it's not compatible with Gibson, so it is different dimensions. I could have something custom, you know, milled to have a TP6 fit there, but might look at some other options as well at some point. As someone who is financing a custom guitar build right now, I need a new axe like another hole in the head, but I felt like this was one of those opportunities where if I didn't get it there, it would be gone, and I would hate myself for the rest of my life for not picking it up. And as I was, you know, checking out the case and making sure everything was good before I bought it, the sales rep actually said, you know, we get a lot of well-to-do guys coming here in their sport coats and button-up shirts, and they'll strum like 4 cowboy chords on the most expensive guitar in the place just because they can afford it, and they'll basically say, yeah, give me that one, and you basically know that it's going to go in someone's house in a humidified room and sit there and be played twice a year at most, and no one wants that for an instrument, even a mass-produced instrument. I don't think anyone that designs that's what you want the fate of it to be. So, you know, he expressed that he was happy to see such a unique, cool piece go to someone who's passionate about playing, and it's definitely one that they've had their eye on for a while, and that everyone in the shop was really excited about. You know, seeing it go to someone that appreciates obviously the shape and the craftsmanship and all that good stuff, and it works really well for me. The only other thing I did to this modification wise is I do have the tone pots bypassed just to give a little bit more of that high, brighter high end. Not that I felt like, you know, I think the capacitor values are right on this to where it's not interfering with that, but just to be safe, it's what I have set up on my other SG as well. And the pickup swap out wasn't a big deal. I'm going to keep all the other original parts though, and yeah, I think it's definitely a pretty cool story to tell, and a very nice addition to my Mesa SG rig for now. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention one cool feature about this guitar compared to other Gibson types. You see that little bump there on the back of the headstock? This is probably the reason that there's no break and there's no repairs needed, because the headstock didn't do one of these things. It's been how many years, and Gibson still hasn't figured out that their little neck joint back here where you're bending the wood grain is not good for the structure of the neck. I don't know how many freaking headstock breaks they have to go through until they finally change it, but I like the feel of this anyway. It gives you a good hard stop, but definitely provided some much needed reinforcement. I've had one pop, my Epiphone, not my Gibson, thankfully, but yeah, so that's nice to see that, you know, the Japanese had that shit figured out 40 years ago. So yeah, 40-year-old guitar, almost twice my age. Super cool. So yeah, pretty stoked about this. Look forward to giving it some limelight on the channel, getting some more demos and playthroughs done on it. And if you have any electric guitar experience, I'd love to hear it and tell me your stories, all that good stuff. And with that, appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.